Democratic Senator from Virginia, Tim Kaine, who's the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Subcommittee on Near Eastern and South and Central Asian Affairs. Thank you for being here, Senator.
You bet, Ari. Glad to be with you.
Let me start with the reaction to some of what you and other Senate Democrats have said. You put out a statement fairly measured, talking about verification, talking about the path ahead. Politico, among other newspapers, have said, well, that looks like Democrats are breaking with this agreement immediately. Is that accurate, and how do you look at this today?
Yeah, not at all. Look, the way I look at this announced deal is very much like the Richard Haas statement from earlier. He made it sound so much simpler than I made it. But the way I look at this deal is there are two basic components to it. We've stretched out the time and made it harder for Iran to have nuclear weapons capable uranium or plutonium. And we've dramatically increased the early warning system. We already have good intelligence, but now we couple that with intrusive daily inspections so that if they decide to go toward weapons-grade uranium or plutonium, we'll know it a lot sooner. Stretching out the time and getting a better early warning system is a good first step. We need to be skeptical. We need to be tough in this interim period and test the complete sincerity of Iran's intentions. But I think this is a good first step from everything I've heard. And we need to just work with all of the P5+1 partners and all countries in the world to make sure that we keep moving toward this very clear goal that Iran will not have nuclear weapons.
And according to the estimates we have, we know that from 2009 we've seen an increase in the quantity of actual low-enriched uranium that Iran does have. One of the big verification procedures here is you get the IAEA weapons inspectors in the mix. How important is that, and do you think that aspect of this is getting enough credit? Because, again, to hit some of the criticism that matters here, your colleagues on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and elsewhere are saying, hey, we don't trust these guys.
And you're right, we shouldn't just trust them. And that's why I think the inspections regime is the key piece to this deal. Because, again, remember when Prime Minister Netanyahu was before the United Nations, he was talking about the amount of enriched uranium that Iran had at the 20% level. The 20% enrichment will be disabled and basically rolled back. Enrichment will be capped at 5%. That means it will take them longer to get to weapons grade. But the real key is the dramatic increase in the inspections by these objective and independent international inspectors. We already remember, have good intelligence, our intelligence and other allied nations, about what's going on in Iran. What we get now is our own continuing intelligence plus this intrusive inspections regime. We will have an earlier warning if Iran decides to violate their agreements and move forward. Now, what I expect to see Congress talking about is clearly, are there additional sanctions we should contemplate if Iran, at the end of this interim period, has not structured an agreement for total disarmament, or if Iran violates the terms of the interim agreement and acts in bad faith to promote weapons-grade nuclear program. So sanctions that would take into account one of those two eventualities, I think it's worth having that discussion. But we need to test with all of our might this diplomatic discussion, because everyone agrees, the United States, Israel, everyone agrees that a diplomatic resolution to this question is far superior than a military resolution or any other resolution.
Right, Senator, and the sanctions seem to have helped bring us at least to the hope of that prospect. Josh Barrow, bringing in Josh Barrow here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that people haven't necessarily seen so much from the U.S. side of this is how well the sanctions have worked in terms of the disruption they've caused in the Iranian economy. And it's actually a disaster for the people of Iran. You've had nearly a doubling in poverty over the last 8 years. Inflation is officially running around 40%, and we think it's actually closer to 80%. So the Iranians and the Iranian leaders are motivated to find a way out of this situation.
And Senator, if you look, we actually have up on the screen the Iranian currency just over the last year, to Josh's point, has been tumbling versus the dollar. It's a tough situation there on the ground. Why do you think, then, to your previous comment, Senator, that you need to have a trigger for more sanctions if we're actually seeing some breakthrough?
Because you need to show that the international community is not relaxing on the ultimate goal of a non-nuclear Iran. I think the concern that skeptics raise, and it's a fair concern that we have to watch, is striking any kind of a partial deal, a relaxation where Iran might suspect, hey, maybe the sanctions go away. We don't want to dismantle the architecture of sanctions. We want to keep them in place because they have worked. But let's be honest, the sanctions have been working, but Iran has also been advancing its nuclear program. In the absence of diplomacy, the sanctions have not been sufficient. The threat of military action has not been sufficient. But being at the table and having a diplomatic dialogue is the thing that has now broken through and enabled us to put a first step on the table where we can measure the sincerity of the Iranians' intention over the next period of time.
Right, and Senator, that's clearly a priority. On the other hand, you have a block of folks in Congress, including many Republicans, who don't seem, from the early reaction we're seeing, to be comfortable with any sort of civilian nuclear program in Iran. I mean, is there, to some degree, are you glossing over that problem that you have a caucus or a wing that wants to do sanctions essentially no matter what, even if you do get something longer term out of the 6 months?
Well, I think you've put your finger on what's going to be a tough and challenging issue over the next 6 months. What the United States position is, Iran will not get nuclear weapons, period, because it jeopardizes the region, jeopardizes the world. It will encourage an arms race where other nations in the region who don't have nuclear weapons will feel like they need to get them. But one of the challenges, as you point out, is Iran says, we're not going to get nuclear weapons, but we would have the right to civilian nuclear energy that any nation would have. And that is a very thorny question. They may have that right. Have they forfeited that right because of the violation of past UN protocols and resolutions? These are the thorny issues why that frankly I think required some kind of a strong interim step and additional negotiation. You've got to build trust on the first step, and each side needs to test each other's sincerity and good faith as we have that ultimate negotiation.
Right, and that's an important contrast there. Virginia Senator Tim Kaine, I know it's a busy week for you in the Foreign Relations Committee. Thanks for spending some time with us.
Absolutely.